So we're talking about Abbot Suger and the Abbey Church of Saint-Denis as the birthplace of Gothic architecture. The Suger, it looks like Suger. Yes, I'm from Chicago. I was born there, so sometimes I'll fall into a Chicago pronunciation. That's okay. Looks like sugar, but it's Suger. Um, we're talking about how Abbot Suger had the means and the motive to make this glorious new thing called Gothic happen. Well, first of all, he's got the power over a church, the Church of Saint-Denis, and it's a major deal because it is a royal church. So this isn't just a church associated with religion, but with the highest political power. It is, in fact, the burial site for all but three of the French kings who ruled from around 1000 up until 1789, when the French Revolution ends royal power, or at least tries to. That's a complicated story for another class. So it also because it's associated with royalty and the burial of royalty, it has the regalia of the French crown. So the kind of ermine cloaks and jeweled scepters that are part of the paraphernalia of power. Remember, this is a key idea. Power needs to legitimize itself. Why do some people get to be kings and others are mere peasants? There has to be an explanation for such a system. Part of that explanation involves the glamorous presentation of the king as God-like. So in this church are also the relics of Saint-Denis, Saint Denis. You say it Denis if you're using a French accent, who is the patron saint of France. A patron saint is the protector, in a sense, the kind of spiritual patron or spiritual leader of France as a political nation, a country, a peoples. So in terms of the means and the motive, this church, which has high importance, was actually run down at the time that Abbot Suger is in charge of it. And so he begins with a kind of reconstruction, a renovation. And he has the motive to make this renovation more fully serve its dual identity as a major royal church and a place of spiritual power, its political and its religious identities. He is so closely affiliated with the French royals that when the king departs France to go on a crusade, Suger acts as regent. A regent is the person who acts in the place of the king while the king is unavailable. So you should think of Suger as a ruler as well as a figure of religious authority. So here in 17.2, your textbook is laying out this background information for you, and they're explaining that Suger's renovations began in the 1130s, and they're hugely ambitious. Note this point. Suger discusses the building of the church in a written account of his administration of the abbey. In other words, he actually tells the story of his process of creating this new building, this renovated building, and with it this new style. This is an amazing gift. We almost never have such kind of accounts for anything before the 1700s at the earliest, more into the 1800s. So one of the interesting things here is how he justifies the building. He says that there's a problem with crowd control. So Suger has a pragmatic argument that it was inadequate for the crowds of pilgrims. He actually writes that the crush of bodies was so intense that he had, on multiple occasions, had women trampling the men, which is amusing because you find, if you study this period, that the misogyny is so thick that whenever there's a problem, it's most always the fault of the women. But you actually find that this episode, this idea that there's a crowd being crushed, crops up repeatedly. So it may well be a justification that the bishop or abbot is giving in order to justify the expense. And I love this detail that your textbook gives, that Suger was not above forging documents to increase the abbey's landholding. It was really important to him to get this church built, or rebuilt, as we could say. This is a really important point here, that Suger, part of his motive came from the inspiration he received from certain texts that he was reading. Now, these texts were thought to be written by someone named Dionysius, which is a Greek way of saying Denis. And so at the time, these were thought to be associated with Saint Denis, who is the martyr associated with the church. It turns out that's not who wrote those texts, those ancient texts. That's why this name is referred to, it's confusing, as the pseudo-Dionysus, the fake Dionysus. Nevertheless, to Suger, the point was what he was reading was associated with the patron saint, and it was all about the concept of divine luminosity, light. You could say that Abbot Suger had a kind of a central theme that he wanted the whole church to be designed around, and that theme was light. And Suger actually articulated that directly, that what he wanted was lux nova, Latin for light, new light. So the central achievement of his renovation starts in the apse, where he wants to have a nobly bright light. The work, by work here he means the artistry, the artwork, the architectural work, the craftsmanship, the design, should lighten the minds so that they may travel through the true lights, to the true light where Christ is the true door. So he's merging that metaphor we've already seen of Christ as the doorway to heaven, which sounds very Led Zeppelin, with this idea of light. So if light is divine, is the manifestation of divinity, he wants his apse to be designed so that it is a kind of flood of light, or a field of light. And so he works with the stone masons to create a design that allows for an elegant and praiseworthy circular string of chapels, by virtue of which the whole church would shine with the most wonderful and uninterrupted light of the most sacred window. So look closely at this photograph, looking into that circular string of chapels. There are no solid walls. We have thin columns. Yes, we do have some solid piers here moving down the nave, but here in the apse, the walls have been opened up and reduced to the thinnest elements in order to allow the stained glass to be the main feature. And if you look at the floor plan, it looks confusing because there's these complicated networks of lines. Those lines represent the ribbed groin vaults on the ceiling that are making it possible to have just these little dots, which are the columns, little dots, slender columns that do not obstruct the light. So we've already seen the ribbed groin vault that Abbot Suger uses at Durham Cathedral, which allowed for more light with a clearer story and more height. But what's different is that at Durham Cathedral, the structure, the piers in the nave, the support system remained quite solid and heavy, weighty. You could see and sense the work it's doing in kind of supporting the roof and working with gravity in a muscular way. That's really different than what Abbot Suger has designed, has initiated at Saint-Denis. Because here the goal is to actually make that stone feel as light as slender as possible, to feel as if the walls are dissolving. That will be the continual push as Abbot Suger's vision gets elaborated in additional cathedrals like this one, which is a coronation church, Rheims Cathedral, and where all the columns are as slender as can be. So I have a little quote here, which is a kind of thesis about what happens with the evolution of Gothic. When the Gothic cathedral is fully realized, the walls are dematerialized. I wish I could take credit for that, but I can't. My friend Josh, who was my friend when I was in college, came up with this. He wrote it in a paper that he claimed to write when he was tripping on acid, and he said that he wrote the entire paper on acid in rhymed couplets. And the thesis rhymes. Okay, I don't know if he was just making up a wild story. Nevertheless, this is true. The Gothic cathedral is about the dematerializing of the walls so that the space feels as if it is an ethereal realm of light. So if we go back to Abbot Suger, his motive in developing the French style in the heartland of the French kings, his style was also known at the time as the royal style, because that light is meant to be a religious experience, the light, the new light, the truth of Jesus Christ, but it's also meant to really convey the idea of the divine right of kings. Divine light and divine right of kings are merged in this space of graciousness and glamour, which is what this style, this royal style, this French style, was understood to be at the time.